Hello, the next part of our session on what is a drug deals with botulinum toxin. Botulinum toxin is one of the few protein drugs, and it does not actually work in the brain. It works in the peripheral nervous system, but it tells us a great deal about what protein drugs could do in the future and some of their limitations. So let's get started. Botulinum toxin is made by Clostridium botulinum, an anaerobic bacterium. The term botulism comes from a German physician who noticed that people who ate a sausage got very sick. They became paralyzed. Their muscles did not work. The sausage had been sitting for hours, and of course it was tightly enclosed in the skin of the animal, which previously was used to make sausage, and was anaerobic. The Clostridium botulinum organism grows better under anaerobic conditions because although it will grow under aerobic conditions, other bacteria outcompete it. So it had been sitting for hours. All of the patients became ill and 6 of them died. The word botulism comes from the Latin for botulus, for sausage. The bacteria had been multiplying under the skin of the sausage and had produced the toxin. Botulinum toxin is extremely dangerous. It is fatal in quantities of as little as 1 molecule per synapse when it's taken into the entire body, because it paralyzes muscles, because the presynaptic terminals cannot release transmitter. The bacterium synthesizes botulinum toxin as a single protein chain, a chain of amino acid residues, and we will discuss proteins in the next session. The botulinum toxin also cleaves the protease at a point which is more toward the beginning than the end of the protein. But the cleaved portion of the protease, of the protein, the 2 portions are still held together by a disulfide bond between 2 cysteine residues. So we have the light chain and the heavy chain held together. The 2 chains enter into neurons and other cells, and there inside neurons there is a reducing environment which reduces the disulfide bond. The light chain and the heavy chain separate. The light chain acts as an enzyme, and we won't be able to talk in great detail about its enzymatic activity in this course, but it is the enzymatic activity that prevents transmitter from being released at synapses. Because so many diseases and discomforts arise from excess muscle activity, botulinum toxin, when injected carefully in minute quantities, can block the excess activity. And in this case, this person has a squint, which cannot be relieved by other medications. A bit of an injection of botulinum toxin relaxes the muscles causing this squint, and the person has a much more comfortable life. Of course, botulinum toxin also relaxes the muscles responsible for frown lines, and it is mostly used under those circumstances in modern societies. However, there are many possible new therapeutic uses for botulinum toxin, and just a few minutes ago I went to the National Library of Medicine, did a search at the database. So here we are at the National Center for Biotechnology Information, part of the National Library of Medicine, part of the NIH, part of the US government. The particular database is called PubMed, so it's the publications in the biomedical literature, and I entered botulinum toxin and came up with something like 13,000 papers that have been written in the last few decades on botulinum toxin. And let's look at the uses for botulinum toxin. The first one that comes up is management of gastroparesis. Gastroparesis is delayed gastric emptying. The stomach cannot easily empty its contents because there's no actual physical blockage by a foreign object, but the muscles at the exit are overcontracted, and so botulinum toxin relaxes those muscles. Here's a paper on synergy and spasticity during functional movement of the post-stroke hemiplegic upper limb. Hemiplegia is a rare neurological disorder that develops in childhood, recurrent episodes of paralysis that involve one or both sides of the limbs. And so again, botulinum toxin is apparently able to relieve this paralysis. Here we are at a database at the National Institutes of Health, the National Institute of Neurological Diseases and Stroke, NINDS. Let's see now, blepharospasm is hit number 3. Blepharospasm, here we are at the National Eye Institute, also part of the NIH. Blepharospasm is an abnormal involuntary blinking or spasm of the eyelids. These can be relieved again by small injections of botulinum toxin. Let's see, spasticity, we know what that is. Skew deviation. What is skew deviation? So we are again, now we're looking at PubMed at a particular paper. Skew deviation is a vertical misalignment of the eyes caused by damage to the brain, but this vertical misalignment of the eyes caused by one muscle being too active can again be reduced by botulinum toxin. Let's see where we are next. We are at glabellar lines. Glabellar lines are frown lines, and so we've heard about glabellar lines. The next place is myelopathy. So let's look down. Before we get to myelopathy, let me tell you about Tourette syndrome, which is tics. And these tics can be, involuntary tics can also apparently be controlled in some cases by botulinum toxin. And so going to cervical myelopathy, I can't find the cervical myelopathy at the moment, but it is a disorder of the neck muscles, spasm in the neck muscles, which is caused by damage to the vertebra, and it too can be relieved in some cases, at least as reported here, by botulinum toxin. This is the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons website. And finally, detrusor activity, that is number 17. What is neurogenic detrusor overactivity? The detrusor is a muscle involved in bladder function, and we can relax that muscle and bladder function again using botulinum toxin carefully. So as you can see, there are a large number of new uses for botulinum toxin, and it's a very interesting protein drug. This ends our module on what is a drug. We've discussed permeation into the brain, and we've discussed botulinum toxin.